Right, now I'll show you how to connect to the MongoDB database, and then we'll create a user based on the user login event, and then insert that users to our database. Okay, so first of all, we need to add a dependencies to the common pom.xml. So the plugin is called EasyData MongoDB, and then you might want to re-import the Maven. And then now let's create some packages in the common module. So because the login function is used both in application and plugin, in other words, it is used in the whole zone. So we implement it in the common module. So first we need to create some package, which are config. The second one is controller. Third one is entity. And the final one is repo. Right, let's close the pom.xml for now. Now I'm going to create the chat tutorial database in the MongoDB. So let's open the terminal or iTerm and access the MongoDB. And then by the command show dbs, I can see all the database. And to create a database, I use command use chat tutorial. And within this database, I want to create a user. It is user root with the password 123456, for example, and the rows read write within the database chat tutorial. Okay, so I have already added the user root to the chat tutorial database. And now let's show the database. You can see the chat tutorial database didn't exist. So to make it appear on the list, I need to add a collection, for example the text collection, and then insert something into it, for example the key and value. You can delete this collection later if you like. Alright, let's try again, show dbs. Now the chat tutorial appears on the list. That's good. We're good to go back to our editor now. And here, first of all, we need to edit the common config.properties. So here we need to specify what is the URI of the MongoDB database and what is the name of the database. Okay, here it is. So we need to define the UI to database. And next, let's create a Java class called MongoConfig. And this one is for like initializing the MongoDB database context. So this one will extend the easy loggable, and the MongoConfig also implements three interface, which are easy properties aware, easy singleton factory aware, and easy bin config. And it has a field called the database name, and we add the annotation easy properties so that the EasyFox server automatically determine the values for the database name based on the properties file. And then we need to implement methods. So here I will implement only the config. And I need to create the properties. Import the property, and then private easy singleton factory. And here I need to add a setter annotation and also easy configuration before annotation, so that the EasyFox server, initialize this context in the initialization phase. So, and okay, so let's implement, let's override the config function here. So in this function, we need to define an easy database context, and then we assign them to the singleton factory repos. So we use the singleton factory to initialize the corresponding repos. And here is how the MongoDB database is created. Okay, so first we use the Easy Mongo Database Context Builder, and we specify the properties, we specify the Mongo client, and we specify the database name. And here's the important part: we need to specify all the packages that we have created in the common, so that this context is aware of those packages. So it automatically initializes all the components inside these packages. Okay. And so the problem is I haven't installed the Lombok plugin for my IDE. So I will install it. I search for the Lombok plugin and then install it. Okay, I need to restart the IDE. Okay, Lombok is successfully installed. Alright, that's good. So it automatically recognizes the setter for the properties and the singleton factories now. And make sure you specify the correct package here. It's actually com.youngmonkeys.common.repo, the service and entities. Okay, now let's create the entity. So we need to create the chat server, chat user. So the chat user has an ID with the value, with the annotation is the ID, and string username, string password. Chat user we need to make it getter, setter, and then toString, and it is a easy collection. So it means chat user is a collection in the MongoDB. And also we will create our first service. I call it chat user service. So to insert our user into the database, we have a function called save user with the chat user parameter. This one is actually an interface, and we need a create user method with username and password. We also need a get user username. Right, so we will use this service in our login controller, but before that we need to create an import package and create the chat user service import. So the context, the EzyChat context will automatically like assign this implementation for this interface. So this one is implement chat user service, and we need to implement all of the methods. This one is a singleton with the name user service, and I use the set annotation for all 8 fields so that all the fields can be automatically defined. So the first one is the chat user repo. I haven't created this one yet. Chat user repo. Okay, I'll create now. So we need a repository to communicate with the MongoDB client. Sorry, with the MongoDB. So this one is an interface with the name chat user repo, and very simple. It just needs to extend the easy Mongo repository chat user, and this one needs to be an easy repository with the name user repo. Oh, good. Let's go back to our chat user service import. So by extend this easy Mongo repositories, this chat user repo automatically have the like CRUD operations like save user, get user by field, etc. And now we can automatically determine the values for it by using the easy auto byte. Okay, in the save user, we just need to call the chat user repo dot save user. It's just that simple. And to create new user, we first create a user object. Just user, and then set the username for it. User dot password, set password for it, and then use the repo to save this user, and then return user. That's it. I'll ignore the ID for now. So, and this one is very simple. Just use the chat user repo and then find by field, find by the username, and then pass in the variable username. Okay. So that is the chat user service implementation. And now let's go back to our login controller in the plugin module. Okay, now we are good to determine what to do when receive a login request. Okay, first I'll create a username equal to event get username, password equal to event.get password, just user equal to no, actually we need to we need to check whether this username exists in the database or not. So we can use the user. Okay, let's define the user service first. So private just user service as user service, and then user service dot get username. If this user doesn't exist in the database, it means user equal to null. Okay, I'll create a new user by using the variable username and password, and then save this user into the database. Otherwise, I'll check if the password is correct, etc. Alright, I will make a log here. Info user doesn't exist in the database. Create a new one. Alright, I think we're good to go now. Oh, I forgot to add the easy auto byte annotation for the user service. Right, so first I will open the MongoDB. So I use the MongoDB Compass to visualize the MongoDB database. So in this chat tutorial, we have only the test collection. Okay, let's run our server. Okay, there is a warning here, but app and plugin are ready to use. So, okay, let's fix this one. So, the log4j could not find the org.mongodb. So, it's very simple. Just need to edit the log4j.properties in the startup modules. This is the resources. Okay, just need to add the log4j.category.org.mongodb, and this one is info console. Okay, and now I will add another log here. User exists in DB. Right, let's rerun our server. Okay, the warning still here. Why? Oh, I have a typo here. That's really bad of me. Okay, let's go back to the user login controller. Right. So the warning disappears. That's good. And now let's try to make another request. So that is the login request. So I use the socket client to send a request with the username test. The password test1234 to the login command with the ID of 20. Okay, I send it. Alright, so you can see the log here. User doesn't exist in the database. Create a new one. So let's see. Let's restart. Let's refresh our database. And you can see the just user is automatically created. So the just user collection is automatically created in the MongoDB chat tutorial database, and it automatically create a username, a user with the username test, password test 1234, and the ID 0. Okay, let's try another request. Okay, so this one. I'll create a test one and then send it. Okay, let's see in the log. So again, it welcomed the test one and it created another new one. However, you can see because the ID here is always 0, so it substitute the old user in our database. That is not what we expected. So now I'll create another service called the Mark ID service. Okay, let's go back to our common module. This is the common module, and then create a service here, which is, I call it just Mark ID service, and it is an interface which extends the Easy Mark ID service. Okay, it's just that simple. So, and then we create an implementation for it, chat Mark ID service import, which implement the chat Mark ID service. It is a easy singleton with the name Mark ID service, and I also use the setter for all the fields. So first we need to implement all the methods. Okay, we don't need the load all method. So let's go to the let's implement the increment and get. So we also need to use a repository to communicate with their MongoDB database. So I call it the Easy Mark ID repository. This one is this one is handled by the EasyFox server already. Mark ID repository. That's really good, and add easy autopilot to it. Okay, so now our task is really simple. Just use the Mark ID repository and increment and get the key. This one is the key, and then this one is Mark ID repository dot increment and get key delta. So at is actually the key and I is the delta. Okay, so now we are ready to use the chat Mark ID service. Let's open the just user service and then create a field called just Mark ID service with the name chat Mark ID service, and automatically determine the value for it. And then in the when creating a user, we need an ID here. So the user.set ID, the Mark ID service dot increment and get. We need a key here. I'll call it just user. And also I need to change the ID of our user to long. So let's go back to this one. Yeah, that's it. Okay, but before we run the server, I'll drop the just user collection for now, and then rerun the server. and let's send a request to our server. So first I'll send the test one with the password test1234. Okay, user doesn't exist in the database. Create one. Refresh. You can see there is a Mac IDs collection in our chat tutorial database, and the ID is now 1. Right, and let's create another user. For example, test2. You can see welcome test2. User doesn't exist. So let's refresh. You can see the ID automatically increment, and yeah, we no longer see the duplication, no, the substitution issues. So yes, so that is how the EasyFox server handled the login event. So after so if the user exists in our database, you can perform the checking for if the password is correct or not, and then do other like logic operations you like. So that's all for the tutorial today. Hopefully you find it useful. See you.